Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, last summer Tasmania suffered through massive bushfires that terrorised local communities and burnt an enormous 3% of the state's surface area. 6% of the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area was burnt. Homes were lost, ancient rainforest ecosystems and alpine communities were lost. Kingbilly pine and pencil pine forests are now gone forever. We know, Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, that the loss would have been far greater if it hadn't been for the work of people on the front line, volunteers and paid. And so the Greens give our deepest thanks to people, volunteer and career firefighters, the SES, local communities who rallied and supported all of us who were affected by the fires and who made sure that more people were not affected. The Australasian Australasian Fire and Emergency Services Authority's review, which was undertaken and the information was provided to us from that review. The report into those bushfires in August was painted an alarming picture of the summers that were to come and painted a particularly scathing picture of the government's failure to be ready in time for last summer's bushfires. The report's authors described the Tasmanian Fire Services State Operations Centre as dated and barely adequate to the task. The report was crystal clear that the TFS needed to be able to properly accommodate and integrate the needs of partner agencies in times of crisis, the partner agencies being Parks and Wildlife Services and Sustainable Timbers Tasmania, so called. It also made the point that the Operations Centre needed to be substantially reconfigured and expanded. The AFAC report found that crews attending the Gel River fire in the southwest late last December and early January were not properly resourced, that there were no aircraft available to identify hotspots, that the frontline crews consequently withdrew too early. The report authors also identified communication issues between Parks and Wildlife Service and the Tasmanian Fire Service and found that resource requests from Parks were delayed. Madam Deputy Speaker, since that point, we had a new minister for Police, Fire and Emergency Service who has only accepted, in principle, the report's 9 recommendations, who has only said that they would be subject to the budget process. The same budget, Madam Deputy Speaker, which has had budget cuts to it, which has had efficiency dividends exacted upon it, including to each of the services that I just mentioned, the Tasmanian Fire Service, Parks and Wildlife Service, and this is in the context of what is an already incredibly dry East Coast, which has an acknowledged high bushfire risk, and it is essentially a frighteningly irresponsible response from this current Police and Fire Emergency Services Minister and the government. And we are deeply concerned that there has been a lack of funding into the services that we need to be as well equipped as they can be for the coming season. Now, the bushfire season is not happening from December. It is not like that any longer. The bushfire season is with us now. We seem to be in a state where we always have a bushfire season. But what we have is 80 people who are currently not available to be deployed as remote area teams because the TFS has not attended to the safety issues that they needed to have attended to in time for this bushfire season. So we've had 8 months now since the firestorm of last summer, 8 months of internal capacity building and risk assessment that ought to have been happening Instead, that's not been done, and we have 80 less people who will be available at any point that a fire breaks out in a remote area in Tasmania than there were last summer. You know, this is a really terrible situation for communities who may be threatened by bushfires in remote areas and who are not getting the support that they need. So it's really deeply concerning that the government fails to appreciate the increasing risk for the state and hasn't provided. We want the minister to stop sitting on his hands on this and to tell us how much money has been put into the extra capacity that was required by the AFAC review, and who is responsible for the planning and enforcing of fuel management on private property at township levels, because that was something the review recommended the minister manage immediately, a review of that. And is it the case that we now have an updated version of the Interagency Fire Management Protocol? And do we have practice now around managing new fire starts in remote terrain? And do we have a whole-of-state fuel management and burning program which is coordinating the activities of the 3 agencies responsible? These are some of the recommendations from the AFAC review, which have only been adopted in principle, yet each of these is
Member's time has expired.
Essential part of our ability to be able to respond appropriately when there's the next fire.
Thank you.